You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
You're tuned in to NightVision Radio, exposing the truth, one secret at a time. Prepare yourself as we explore the shadow worlds of suppressed history, secret knowledge, forbidden religion, and shine a light on the conspiracies to keep it all from us. Welcome to NightVision Radio. Hey everybody, so glad you could join us tonight. This is this wonderful holiday season. I hope everybody's enjoying it and not rushing around too much and getting too involved in the materialism around Christmas. A lot of us are probably struggling this time of the year, so hopefully we'll all remember the true meaning of the season and maybe just do something nice for somebody else. Now, I got a great show planned for tonight. I'm really excited. But before we get started, I wanted to make a little announcement. You guys, most of you, if you've listened to my show for very long, you know Gloria Amendola. She's a recurring guest on my show. She's one of my good friends. She and I do tours to Europe, to England and France together. And she's also the author of several books. The latest one's just been released on Mary Magdalene, and it is now available. It's just been released. So go to gravedistractionspublishing.com, gravedistractions.com, I should say, and check it out. There's a series of 3 books. This is the 3rd one, and you're going to love it. But what I really wanted to tell you about was an event that Gloria's having. If you happen to be up there in the northeast, in the northeast, in the greater Hartford, Connecticut area, she's having a winter solstice 2015 event, and it's about I guess it's winter solstice 2014-15, I guess you would say. It's on Sunday, December 21st, 2014, from 7 to 9 p.m. If you want more information on it, it's actually about wealth consciousness. So I guess that's something we could all use. So please give Gloria a look-see over at her website, gloriaamendola.com. This is a great event. She's done this in the past for years, and she gets absolute great feedback from these events, and everyone is always has a great time and also learns something, so that's doubly good. But without further delay, I want to get right into tonight's show. Tonight my guest is an old friend, an old colleague. We worked together for years on UFO Magazine and also on his radio show for 5 years called UFOs Tonite. And so he's strong-armed me a time or two onto his show, and I've definitely strong-armed him more than that onto my show, and I'm so glad that he's back tonight. Welcome, UFO research director, former UFO research director, and author Don Ecker. Oh, also host of Dark Matters Radio. Can't forget that. I'll get in trouble. Hey, Don.
Hey, Renee. How you doing, girl?
I'm doing fine. You know, I was thinking about, what I wanted to do this week on the show, and I was thinking it might be fun.
Besides strong-arming me onto tonight, you mean?
That's right. Well, you guys opened it up. You should have never called me, or your wife should have never called me, or I wouldn't have even thought of this thing. What happened was Don's wife, Vicki, who was the founder and editor-in-chief of UFO Magazine, who I worked directly with there at the magazine, happened to call me, left a message, and when I called back, I got Don. Well, we started gassing for about, an hour. So I thought, well, why don't we do this on the air? So we were talking about, reminiscing about the UFO days and about UFO Magazine and some of the cases that came our way during that time. Some of the best cases, I guess, the best evidence, the historical cases, some of the biggest hoaxes, and some of the worst cover-ups, I think.
Or as I call it, Renee, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Some very ugly stuff went on, I can remember. But anyhow, getting into it, what drew you originally to this subject matter? And then, of course, later, obviously, you married the publisher of UFO Magazine, so I imagine you kind of inherited it by then, but you were already well into the subject matter yourself.
Well, not only did I marry her, Renee, you were at the wedding.
That's right.
It was 21 years ago today.
Oh, my God, that's so crazy.
Today is our anniversary.
Yeah, now, I got to just tell just a tiny bit of that story. We decided, or they decided, it wasn't really my decision, that they were going to get married on the air, on the radio show UFOs Tonite. We did it every Saturday night without fail for at least 5 years.
Well, almost 6.
That I was there. Yeah, absolutely. And so, Don, if you remember, you were hell-bent. You were going to host that show. Until the day, I kept saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" Yeah, oh yeah, I can do it. Then at the last minute, you go, "Renee, you got to do the show." So I was thrown into it. I wasn't hosting a radio show at that time, but I got thrown into that one. But we had all kinds of UFO.
You did a heck of a job too, I might add.
Oh, well, thank you. Believe me, I had no idea what the heck I was doing. But we had all kinds of luminaries calling in, like Zechariah Sitchin. And who were some of the other people, Don?
Bud Hopkins.
Yep.
Bud Hopkins.
I was thinking Bud called.
Yeah. David
Jacobs.
Kevin Randall.
Yep.
God, I'd have to go back and dig that show out to hear who all did call in. And Renee, the other thing was they said it would never last.
That's right. Oh, my gosh. That's right. And you're still together after all these years. And I'm still friends with both of you. Hey, that's an accomplishment in itself. But, Dawn, some of the things I was thinking about today after you and I were gabbing on the phone for a while, and I was thinking about, or yesterday, I guess, that the Gulf Breeze incident, back in, what was it, 1987, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it started 87.
Big UFO flap, as they call them. Lots of sightings, lots of citizens and documentation and newspaper articles. And then I remember there was something about one guy who had taken some footage, and then they found a paper plate UFO in his attic. So the whole thing was a hoax. So what was the deal on that, and what do you think about that story today?
Well, the guy that shot the footage originally was a fellow by the name of Ed Walters.
Oh, yeah.
And his wife's name, I believe, was Frances. And that case broke, and for whatever reason, and a lot of people had seen something flying around in the skies down there on numerous occasions. So, something apparently was definitely in the sky. However, the other thing, and you know me, Renee, I've never jumped into anything without doing an investigation to the fullest ability I had. That was an area surrounded by military bases. Okay, there were military bases all over the place. So is it possible that some of those could have been military aircraft, experimental aircraft, whatever? I don't know. But Ed Walters contacted some of the folks in MUFON. Back in those days, Walt Andrus was the international director.
Yeah.
And one of the people that sat, I believe he was on the board, was naval optical physicist Bruce Maccabee. Now, Maccabee got Walters a camera setup that was taking dual photographs where they would merge them together. I forget now all the ins and outs, but the next time that Walters had a feeling, he would get these feelings, according to what he said at the time, that something was going to show up. He ran out and took some photographs that later Bruce Maccabee did an optical analysis on. Now, Maccabee pretty much signed on to that. Now, what you were talking about as far as somebody finding a model in his attic, now this case always struck me as odd. I think initially that there was something definitely there. The model that was found, well, first, Walters had moved out of that house. Now, the fact of the matter was this case had achieved international acclaim. It wasn't only in Florida, Gulf Breeze.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't only in the United States, but it literally went around the entire globe. I mean, everybody had, at one point or another, heard about the Gulf Breeze case. And back in those days, there were a number of television shows, actually almost a stream of different TV shows that ran UFO stories weekly. I mean, the UFO topic was tremendously covered then. And when the story broke that this young guy had found a model in Ed Walters' former attic, the house that he formerly owned, that created another stir. Now, I later learned or heard that the model was created out of paper mache and some other things that allegedly had blueprints that Ed Walters had drawn and designed. And then the implication was later he used this to make this model to hoax the case. Is it entirely a hoax? I've never believed that. I've known people personally that have gone down to Gulf Breeze and witnessed an object in the skies down there. As a matter of fact, this thing even got a nickname. They called it Bubba. Oh, look, there's Bubba in the sky. And one of the guys that had been down there and witnessed this, René, is my now Friday night co-host, Richard Saraday. You know Rich, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Well, Richard actually had been down in that part of the country with his family a number of years ago, and they saw this thing. So is there something flying around, or was there something flying around? You bet. But as far as the whole Walters case, I got to tell you, my thinking is a lot of that is still in my gray basket.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, I had the feeling at the time that, maybe they were hoaxing it. But then when you really look at all the people that saw things, there had to be something that they were seeing. Like you said, we don't know what that was. But there definitely was something that people were seeing other than Ed and Francis Walters. And I did also wonder whether somebody planted that model or whatever that was to sort of make it looked like it was a hoax, to sort of maybe cover it up. Even if it wasn't UFOs, if it was some, black ops project or something like that, they still would have wanted to cover that up. So, but that's good. But thanks for going back into that. Now, another one that I know everybody's going to know about but they probably don't know the essence, or I guess I should say the genesis of the story. And that is, and this is another one, I want to know what you think about it today, the alien autopsy.
Oh, my God.
Not very many people know that started actually with you getting a tape.
Yeah, well, the alien autopsy case, and today it's considered to be a huge hoax, that garnered the perpetrators literally millions of dollars. Ray Santilli is the name most frequently associated with that case. Another guy who was a German investor into this, a fellow by the name of Volker Spielberg, was another guy involved in this case, and it was, quite frankly, a mishmash from the very beginning. I was in Europe in 1993. My wife, Vicki, and I were over there as speakers at the first International World UFO Congress. And one of the people that I connected with over there was a British researcher by the name of Phil Mantle. Now, after we got back to the States, I guess it was sometime in January, Mantle called me up, and he had somehow connected with this case. Now, I got to tell you, I have always had my doubts about what Mantle may have known or didn't know. But I will say this, I do not feel that he played straight with me from the get-go. He had called me up and asked me if I had heard about an alleged bit of Roswell UFO wreckage film that had been discovered by a producer by the name of Spielberg. Now, obviously, who's the first person, René, that you would think?
Well, Steven Spielberg.
Right. So he said, and I understand that some people in the States, he said, know about this. He said, could you check it out? Well, back in the early 90s, as you will well recall, we were on doing TV out of UFO Magazine all the time. I mean, yep. Week in and week out, we would have TV production companies calling us up, wanting to interview us, all types of stuff.
News programs, too.
Oh, yeah.
Larry King Live.
Yeah. Well, as a result of all that, I knew a lot of TV producers, and I started making some calls to find out if there was any truth to this. Now, one of the people I talked to was a producer at the time with Fox by the name of Robert Kiviat. Kiviat told me he would do a little checking on this and get back to me. Well, as it turned out, he did. He made some inquiries at Fox. Nobody was really aware of this, but then they found out that there was going to be a so-called unveiling of some of this footage in either April or May. I honestly, I don't recall now. So Kiviat got back to me and said, look, he said, I'm going to be flying over to the UK, to the United Kingdom. He said, and see what the story is on this. Well, basically, the guy with the footage was an entrepreneur, shall we say, Ray Santilli. And basically what they were doing were opening the bids for this thing. He was bound and determined and ultimately ended up making a killing on this. So, as a little bit of time went on, Kvyat came back, and obviously Fox was in the bidding war for this. Other little bits and pieces of this started to filter out. Supposedly, this was the story. A World War II combat photographer had supposedly been there with his military equipment filming this autopsy after the Roswell crash. Now, in those days, as René had mentioned, I was doing my weekly radio program, my weekly radio show, UFOs Tonight, and it was, at the risk of sounding a little full of myself, it was a smash hit, wasn't it, René?
It was really good, and and it was sort of like the prime source for the material at the time, because you did it in the same way that the magazine was done. And I know Vicki used to always say, that we always try to take a very journalistic approach to a very fringe subject, and I felt the show did the same thing. So that I appreciated that about it.
Well, obviously, and the fact that I'm a medically retired criminal investigator, I was a police detective. I mean, when I went into this, it was with the idea of trying to garner whatever facts were available. So, it so happened that some of the people, the fans of UFOs Tonight that tuned in, were in the film and TV industry. And it turned out that one or two of those guys basically had fathers that had been combat photographers during World War II. In other words, these were the guys over in the Pacific when the Marines would go into a Japanese-held island. These guys would go in and film it for the military archives. And the same thing in Europe. Well, they come from a very small clique of guys. They all knew each other. So I figured, okay, well, if this was legitimate, if this guy that supposedly shot this really was a combat photographer, it's going to be fairly simple for me and these guys to figure out who it was. Well, the bottom line was, we could never find anybody. And I was skeptical and suspicious, to say the very least. So, what I did was, part of the story involved the actual film leader on these rolls of film, was from Kodak. Now, the way that, as I discovered, when they were using this actual film stock, the dates and codes on these rolls of film, they used a code like in 1947, there would be a code on it. Then the next time they would change the code would be like 20 years later. And supposedly this leader from 1947 was the correct film leader that was on this material, okay? This was the story. So I called up Kodak, and I spoke to somebody very high in the company, and basically it wasn't quite like what these guys were trying to tell me from England. So I called England, and I spoke directly to Ray Santilli, and I asked him some very pointed questions. And to make a long story short, as I later found out, the SOB lied through his teeth. The bottom line was, I was convinced it was a hoax, and that's what we ran in the magazine.
Yep. Now, but remember when Stan Winston, I guess, sort of gave a slight credence to it when he said, if it's a hoax, it's sure a good one. Whoever did this was really knew how to do special effects. This would have been very difficult to do. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but that's crap.
But I think then, didn't we also then later interview Stan Winston, or maybe you even had him on the show? I don't remember. But
I interviewed pathologists on the show. Do you remember that? I can't think now.
Cyril Wecht.
Yes, Cyril Wecht.
Yep.
I interviewed him. He was attached to this story.
Yep, he was too. And I think what they both said was whatever they were putting out there had just sort of been taken out of context, and they weren't really endorsing.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, gosh, can you hold it? Because we're getting ready to go to break.
Absolutely.
And we'll be right back, so please stay tuned. I'm talking with Don Ecker, and we'll be right back with more on UFOs.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best.
Hello, Inception Radio Network. Would you like your favorite show to be played again live on air? Well, now the choice is in your hands with IRN's live request portal, an easy way to request your favorite show with a simple click. IRN's live request portal now gives you exclusive access to all the shows. How easy is it? Simply type a show name or a guest name, click request, even write a dedication message, and that's it. Try it now. Simply visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com, click on the live request tab under the show menu. Now playing your favorite show is just a mouse click away.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again. Psst, are you looking for a cure for boredom? Never worry. IRN's new interactive website introduces a number of ways to pass time while you listen to your favorite show. Choose anything from the IRN chat lounge, the game lounge, video lounge, or the mood lounge. These fun, exciting features let you chat in real time with fellow listeners, view live skywatches, play daily posted online games, or pick a show based on topic. The choices are endless. Use your time wisely, keeping it all on IRN.
Hey, IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to NightVision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth, one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
Welcome back. You're listening to Night Vision Radio. I'm your host, René Barnett, and we are talking with Don Ecker. He's an author. He's the former research director of UFO Magazine, and he is the host of Dark Matters Radio. We're talking about UFO cases. We were just speaking about the alien autopsy, and Don had something else he wanted to share.
Oh, yeah, this story kept getting better and better, René. So, okay, I guess basically, if we're going by degrees of separation, I was ground zero for the alien autopsy getting into American TV, right?
Yep.
Now,
absolutely.
Before I decided that the whole thing was a bucket of you-know-what, I was just anxious as could be to see this tape, to see this film. And, hey, I took it originally to Kiviat, right?
Right.
So they get it at Fox. They bring it back, and I'm sitting there on my tail end for weeks and weeks. And I would call Kiviat up, and I'd say, Bob, okay, you got the film. I want to come over and see it. Well, I can't show you yet, but don't worry, Don, you're going to see it. So this kept up until like about a week or so before the show was scheduled to run the first time on the air. So finally, I get done with UFOs Tonight one Saturday night. We get home. Vicki and I get back to our house from the studio. I come in. I was going to watch a little bit of TV. I guess it was about 11:30, and the phone rings. Now, after 10 p.m., Renee, you get a phone call. It's generally what? Horrible news.
Bad news.
And I'm thinking to myself, oh, God, now what is this? So I answer the phone. Hello? And it's Bob Kiviat. He says, Don, come on down to my office tomorrow. 10 o'clock, he said, you can finally see the film. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, all right, fine. So I go in and I tell Vicki, I said, hey, we can go down and take a look at this film footage of the infamous alien body being autopsied. Oh, okay, when? I said, well, tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, 10 o'clock. So we get up about 8, have coffee, eat a bite of breakfast, get dressed, drive over to Kiviat's offices, go in, he's in there, we sit down. He says, okay, Don. He pops this thing in, turns it on. Now, I got to tell you, I'm just a little bit, Renee, underwhelmed. Okay? Was it interesting? Definitely. Did I think it was real? Well, I wasn't sure at that point. Did it look real? Well, somebody did a fairly good job on it. So we watch it. It runs to the end. It was only a few minutes, actually. He turns it off. He says, well, what do you think? You know how Kiviat talks, right?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, well, I got to tell you, it's interesting. He said, well, Don, he said, I want you to come on board as the researcher on the cameraman. And I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, I want you to do all the research. I said, Bob, this thing's going to air in a week. Well, yeah, can't you do it in a week? He says, look. He says, there's your desk, and he pointed to this desk. There's your phone, all this stuff. And I said, well, we haven't discussed anything. We haven't discussed, what you're offering to pay me or anything. And then the room got dead silent, Renee. Now, remember, who was hosting this? Jonathan Frakes.
Right.
Commander Beefcake from Star Trek. The Next Generation, okay? Jonathan Frakes. And I looked at Bob and I said, well, what's the story? He said, we don't have a budget to pay you. I said, what are you saying? Well, he said, I'm saying I don't have any money to pay you, but I want you to come in and do the research on this. And I kind of got this grin on my face, and I said, Bob, let me ask you a question. What? I said, is Jonathan Frakes doing this gratis too? And, that's where the conversation died right there. UFO Magazine was at most a 3-person operation. He wanted me to take a week or more off of my regular job to go in there and do this for nothing. I mean, that is television in a nutshell, Renee.
That's ridiculous. He made so much money. There was so much money made on that. If you remember it, they aired it twice, and then they
four times,
and then they debunked it. twice.
Yeah.
So they, they
4 times.
But now what I want to know is, because, as you know, and as some of our listeners know, after I did UFO Magazine was actually my springboard into television. I went from there to do Strange Universe, which was about all this UFOs and paranormal subject matter. And since that time, I've done a lot of work. I ended up having my own production company, working all around town. And this town is very small, as you know, the entertainment industry, and everybody knows everybody. Well, I know a lot of guys that worked on the alien autopsy who say that the footage that they saw was so bad and so dark that Fox asked them to recreate it. And I know guys that I could name. I don't really want to. I didn't have their permission. I didn't think about it, or I would have asked. That worked on, the editors and producers that worked on that show, that said they created that footage. That that wasn't the original footage. Now I wonder if the delay. You and I have never talked about this aspect of it, that you got from them delaying showing you the footage was actually the time that they were taking to create the new footage. Is that possible?
Well, I got to tell you, Renee, I've never heard that before tonight.
Wow.
I've never heard that. So is it possible? I suppose actually anything is possible. But I never heard that until you just said it now.
Yep. I absolutely, I will attest to that. Know people very, very well. I would consider them, friends and work colleagues that talked about it many times about the alien autopsy and how it was put together.
This case, now, as you know, I was in the center of so much UFO material for so long that this is actually the first time that I even thought about the autopsy in probably 15 or more years. So it's been a long time that since I've thought much about anything concerning that. As a matter of fact, the bottom line was, for me, I considered it to be a huge hoax and a lie, and I pretty much put it out of my head. But there are, and I know this for a fact, there are still people today that believe that was real.
Oh, and,
yes. There are so many ins and outs. People that I talked with, people in the UK, people in France, people in the United States, that I'm just 1,000% convinced it was totally hooey from the get-go.
Yep. Well, thanks for that. That was interesting. I'm glad we had that conversation, because you and I have never discussed that aspect of it. So anyhow, okay, next. Well, I'm going to throw in a question from the chat room, if you don't mind, because, first, I wanted to let you know we've got somebody that showed up in the chat room that's calling himself Producer Jeff.
Really?
Wonder who that could be.
Producer Jeff, I say, hey.
Yeah, Jeff Floro has turned up for tonight's show. He also worked with Don and I on UFOs Tonite.
Jeff was producer.
That's right. And he also worked on NightVision for the first 6 years, almost 7 years of it. And first and foremost, he is the composer, the arranger, and the performer of my theme song for NightVision. So everybody, my chat roomies always compliment that music theme, and so I just let them know a little while ago that it was Jeff. So they've been chatting away with Jeff in the chat room. So thanks for joining us tonight, Jeff. He's
Merry
also been
Christmas, Jeff.
He said, yeah, we learned a lot and saw a lot working with Don on UFOs Tonight. Well, yeah, we can't talk about that, though, Jeff. But anyhow, yeah, that was great. Those were the days. But anyhow, from the chat room, Bill from New York wanted to know what was your take on all the UFO sightings in Pennsylvania in the 60s?
Well, of course, one of the most famous cases...
Because you're from Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the most famous cases that I remember vividly when it happened was the 1965 Kecksburg UFO case. Now, that was a case where allegedly something came down from the sky, crashed just outside. It's a small town of Kecksburg, a small village or whatever. And it created such a, and that's been now very shortly, it's been 49 years. We're heading into the 50th year ago that this case occurred. And it involved the United States Air Force. There are stories that came out that the Air Force out of Pittsburgh came over, hauled something away on a huge flatbed truck surrounded by armed Air Force personnel. At the time, a lot of people thought it was an extraterrestrial craft. I've got to tell you, I was never a first-hand researcher on that case, although I know several of the first-hand researchers on that case. It's a case that to this day, and I'm talking about 2014, this happened in 1965, still divides the town of Kecksburg into those people that believe it was E.T. and those other people that believe it was not, or a total hoax. Now, what I did do was when things started to creep out about this case, I did do some research into space law. And the reason I did that was one of the suggestions that popped up at the time, and remember, 1965, at that point in our history, the United States and the Soviet Union were in a neck-and-neck race to outer space to put somebody on the moon. One of the suggestions was that it might have been some kind of Russian or Soviet space hardware that we grabbed and carted off. Now, had that have happened, we would have been guilty of breaking law, international law, because we had signed treaties with the Soviets that if we had some space hardware that came down that they got their hands on, they had to give it back, and vice versa. If we got our hands on some of their stuff, we had to give it back. Now, what's the bottom line? Well, I don't know. It's one of those cases that still today will cause a raging debate. But at the time that the case happened, I was living in my hometown in central western Pennsylvania. This made news everywhere. And it was, and for some reason, René, the date of December the 11th is running in my mind. I don't know if that was the exact day that it happened, but for some reason, that's the date that I'm thinking of. But I know it was December of 65. I remember it was cold. It was snowy in my hometown. And when that happened, everybody on local radio and TV was talking about it. Then it went black. It totally, no more No more came out about it until years later. So that was always, I thought, a very interesting case.
Wow. Yeah, it was December 9th. I just looked it up. Now, Bill wanted to know, do you know whether that object was taken to Wright-Patterson?
No idea. No idea. The Air Force claimed that they didn't take anything away, but there were a lot of witnesses. Now, the object in question was described as being about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle bug, okay? The old Beetle bug. And it was an acorn-shaped object, according to witnesses that claimed to see it. But the Air Force has just clammed up about it. So whatever it was, no idea. Where they took it, no idea. What did they do with it? No idea.
Wow. Now, I guess, we can't do a show about historical UFO cases without bringing up the Big E Roswell. Now, all these years down the road, now I know I can remember us having, of course, you were good friends with Dr. now, Kevin Randall, who did extensive work, and Don Schmidt on the subject of Roswell. You were also interviewed witnesses. You interviewed Jesse Marcel.
Yeah, well, I also discovered a first-hand witness to the case, if you remember, Thomas Gonzalez.
Yes, okay. I was going to bring that up, and I couldn't remember. I remembered Mr. Gonzalez, and I was trying to remember whether he was connected to Roswell or to the alien autopsy.
No, he was a member of T Squadron.
That's right. And you and Dwight Schultz went over and paid him a visit, right?
Oh, that's a hell of a story in itself.
Oh boy, yeah, I remember that time when you guys went over there. And now, what do you think was the real deal at Roswell?
Well, of course, now what we're getting into is my own personal speculation. What do I think it was? I think it was an alien, extraterrestrial, not of this world spaceship. That's what I think. Now, there are a lot of people that I'm sure would love to argue with me about it. But there are a number of reasons why I say that. Number one, what the military did and how they acted toward civilian witnesses there. And we at UFO Magazine, over the years, tracked down a number of firsthand civilian witnesses to the event and spoke with them. I spoke with a retired military, what was he, a brigadier or a lieutenant general, that was involved with that case. As a matter of fact, I've got a tape recording of that somewhere here. The guy that I spoke with, and he made it very plain and very clear that basically the Army Air Force was having puppies over this case at the time. Okay, they were having puppies. And then when I discovered Mr. Gonzalez, and we went down to Texas, and I interviewed him down there, and I still have the video tape of that, René. Mr. Gonzalez carved for me. He was, at the time, he was an elderly man. He was about 78 or 79 years old. This was in April of 1994 when Dwight Schultz and I and Vicki went down there. And he gave me 4 carved little figures of the occupants that he personally claimed to not only see. 3 of them were dead, but one of them he alleged to me that he had communication with, okay, before this still living entity was carted away. Now, was I there? No, of course not. I wasn't even alive then. But the man became very emotional. Now, Renee, as you know, for years I dealt with the public. I dealt with the public as a police officer. Later, I dealt with the public as a businessman in UFO Magazine. I had to be able to do a halfway decent read on people. And you will know that I did not brook somebody trying to smoke me, okay, very polite. Mm-hmm. I could read people. And this man was genuine when he became emotional about that. And whatever it was affected him deeply. And as a matter of fact, it affected a lot of those military veterans. Gonzalez was one that was affected years after the event, like a number of other ones I was familiar with, became a very heavy drinker. Okay, now granted, a lot of those guys, including Gonzalez, were World War II veterans. Being a military Vietnam veteran myself, I know what war can do to men, okay?
Sure.
But this was something else. Jesse Marcel, Sr., okay, Major Marcel, was another man that was affected deeply. And there are a number of others that I could spout off about how they were affected. But I'm convinced that something of such a high degree of strangeness happened that there's no doubt in my mind why the military lied about Roswell. Not once, not twice, but 3 times they lied about Roswell publicly, and it became public knowledge that they lied about it. And nobody has ever called them to account for that. Not the least of which was Representative U.S. Congressman Stephen Schiff,
right,
okay, out of New Mexico, a man that I interviewed on UFOs Tonight about this very case. Went to the GAO, okay, the Government Accounting Office, to get them to run an investigation on what had happened in Roswell, not whether it was a UFO or an ET craft or whatever, but why, against federal law, over 3 years of military communications from the 509th went inexplicably missing, which of course encompassed that time period. It went missing, and now today, 70 years later almost, there's no way in God's green earth will we ever know what documents were taken out of there and probably destroyed. So this is a cover-up from top to bottom.
That's a travesty. Just a little sidebar to that story. When I was doing Strange Universe, it was in 96 or 97. We were doing some show that had to do something with UFOs, and we were shooting inside a little gift shop in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where this lady had an alien, lying on a bench or something, and all kinds of UFO memorabilia type stuff and little tchotchkes in her store. Well, when our crew got in her store, she was telling them that her dad had been there at Roswell. He was part of that group, and so we actually sent someone, and I actually contacted Kevin Randall, and Kevin, the show flew him down to Santa Fe to interview this witness, and he verified that the guy was a witness and that no one had ever found before, and he was the accountant or an accountant for the group, and he told Kevin that, and it was in our piece, that he paid for tiny coffins. after
Really?
that incident. Yeah. Ask Kevin about that.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So, I mean, and of course, I'm sure he's gone now. He was very elderly then. He was like, in-home hospice care at that time. So, I'm sure most of those are gone. But I remember one of the best, I guess maybe not the best witness necessarily, but one of the ones that really kind of, I always remember, unfortunately, I don't remember her last name. You probably will. Frankie Rowe, who was a young girl at the time, and they scared her so badly.
My wife is always telling me if I could get rid of all that trivia in my head and money-making schemes, we'd both be doing so much better, Renee.
That's funny. Well, goodness. So, yeah, Frankie Rowe, she was a good witness. Also, Glenn Dennis, the funeral director.
Right.
And I guess that's where the accountant guy probably obtained the tiny coffins, I would imagine.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind whatsoever that whatever happened in Roswell, it was not a prosaic experience. For years, I butted heads specifically with some of the most well-known skeptics about this field, in this field. People like Philip Klass, Jim Oberg, Bob Schaefer, Michael Shermer, name them, and at one point or another I've had an argument with them, either on or off the air. And the bottom line is the level of research that these guys have never done about this case. It makes me wonder how the majority of them can look at themselves in the mirror, because they are, as a rule, totally ignorant of the facts surrounding these cases.
On that note, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, more on historical UFO cases, including some recent comments that have come out on the Rendlesham Forest incident. So we will be right back with Don Ecker.
Chicago, Illinois.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app, you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
Looking for a cure for boredom? Never worry. IRN's interactive website introduces a number of ways to pass time while you listen to your favorite show. Choose anything from the IRN Chat Lounge, Game Lounge, Video Lounge, or the Mood Lounge. These fun, exciting features let you chat in real time with fellow listeners, view live skywatches, play daily posted online games, or pick a show based on topic. The choices are endless, so use your time wisely by keeping it all on IRN.
Hi, Bob Tarmac for MJ'sHealthyWay.com. Are you into vitamins, nutrition, meal replacements, health shakes, keeping your body in good shape, your internal engine going? Boy, do I have a perfect place for you. MJ'sHealthyWay.com. They offer the best service and products, and they'll tell you anything you need to know about any product they have to offer. I get all my vitamins, meal replacements, shakes from MJ'sHealthyWay.com. That's spelled MJS Healthy Way. mjshealthyway.com. There's so much more at the website. Go check it out, mjshealthyway.com.
Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Just a reminder that Inception Radio Network is on Twitter. Follow us at I_R_N and keep up to date about who's on tonight, what interviews they'll be doing, who's guest spotting, what topics they'll be covering. Tweet to us, tweet about us, retweet topics to your friends, and most importantly, never miss a great show again. That's I_R_N.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. Would you like your favorite show to be played live on air? Well, now the choice is in your hands with IRN's Live Request Portal, an easy way to request your favorite show with a simple click. IRN's Live Request Portal now gives you exclusive access to all the shows. How easy is it? Simply type a show name or a guest name, click request, and even write a dedication message. That's it. Try it now. Simply visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com, click on the Live Request tab under the show menu. Playing your favorite show is just a mouse click away.
Hey, IRN listeners, make sure you tune in to Night Vision Radio with René Barnett. René will be exposing the truth one secret at a time. When? Thursdays. Every Thursday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where? Right here on IRN.
Hey, we're back. Thanks so much. We're talking with Don Ecker. And Don, before we get going again, because I'm afraid we'll roll right into the end of the show, the rate we're going, the time is flying like crazy. Let's talk a little bit about your show, Dark Matters Radio, and how to hear it. Hey, actually, there were some people in the chat room I think would be interested in your music show, too. So tell us about both of those.
Oh, sure. Dark Matters Radio is being broadcast on Cyberstation USA. As I say on my show, we start out here in sunny Southern California, where I grab that signal. I toss it all across the fruited plain, all the way back to Beantown, Boston, Massachusetts, where Cyberstation USA lassos it up and sends it out to the world. And it starts Monday through Thursday, 10 p.m. Pacific until midnight. Friday night, we start at 9 p.m. until 11 Pacific time. Now, to hear it live, all you got to do is go to www.D as in Delta, Q as in Quebec, DQRM as in Mike.com. And that will shoot you right into Cyberstation USA. Now, on Fridays, immediately following Dark Matters Radio, is my rock and roll show, Vicious Vinyl, Don Ecker's Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll, where usually what we're zeroing in on is 60s and 70s, which was basically the height of rock and roll. But coming up on Friday is a new Christmas show. I just did. It will be airing tomorrow for the first time, called Vicious Vinyl, Don Ecker's A Twisted Christmas. So this is a little bit different than your traditional Christmas caroling, Renee.
Maybe we ought to grab a little Christmas spirit before we listen to that show.
No, it's not, it's not nasty.
No, I'm talking about the kind that you drink.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well. Yes, absolutely.
I should have said Christmas spirits.
Little eggnog goes a long way. You bet.
Well, that's great. So thanks Thanks so much. I shared that link in the chat room. That's dqrm.com for Dark Matters Radio and for Vicious Vinyl. So look it up, folks. Now, that's Monday through Friday. You said at 9 Pacific, right? No, or 10 Pacific. Monday through Thursday, 10 to midnight Pacific. Friday, 9 to 11 Pacific. Correct?
Roger. All
right. Jeff is saying in the chat room, asking if Don is the new Dr. Demento. It sure sounds like it. Anyway, back to the subject of UFOs. Shall we move on, or did you have something else that you wanted to say before the about what we're talking about before the break? I have some other stuff to ask you about whenever you're ready. All right. Now, let's see. There were some people that were asking in the chat room. I'm trying to get back to that question. Someone brought up the Phoenix Lights and, how they tried to make that seem like such a joke. And I guess was it the governor that came out in the alien suit or something like that later? And
yeah. Well, it not
kind of poo-pooed it all.
One of his staff. You see, at the time, a lot of people. Now, this is one thing about the American public, Renee. Most people in the public have an attention span about the width of a gnat's rear end, okay?
I'm guilty.
Not very long.
Yeah.
At that time, the governor was having some problems, shall we say, where he was leaving office, not all according to his own wishes, all right? There were some legal things staring at him. So I have always suspected that somebody put a little pressure on him to diffuse this. Now, the Air Force went out of their way to try to convince everybody that they were only seeing the dropping of flares from aircraft and that kind of thing. No, there was something of a tremendous size flying over the skies of Phoenix. Now, shortly after that, and we at UFO Magazine covered that story extensively. We called up the Air Force Base down there. We spoke to their public information people. We spoke to Frances Barwood. And
yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. She was she the mayor or
city councilman?
City councilwoman, yeah.
We spoke to her. We spoke to witnesses down there. And I also, shortly thereafter, spoke with George Knapp, KLAS TV Channel 8 news reporter in Las Vegas. A lot of people are not aware that there was apparently this same object that night in question that was also seen over the skies of Nevada. Mm-hmm. And they tracked it. According to what Knapp told me, they tracked it in a line going directly toward Phoenix. So, whatever it was, whether it was some type of top secret military experimental aircraft, whether it was an alien ship, whether it was something from somewhere else, I have no idea. But the fact that it was there, in my mind, is beyond any dispute.
Wow. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think it was another a case of something otherworldly, or do you think it was military? To me, it seemed like something else.
I would hesitate to guess. I am going to stick with the idea that, yeah, it was there. Where it came from is anybody's guess.
Wow. That's wild. Well, before we get too far down the road here, I did tell everyone that we're going to be talking about the Rendlesham Forest incident. That was in 1980, I believe.
Christmas. 1980.
I was going to say December. What are these? All these UFOs show up in December all the time.
Yeah.
But it was something came out recently. We were going to have Larry Warren on this show several weeks back, and we had some technical problems making the connection with him. But we were having Larry Warren and John Burroughs, another witness to the RFI incident, and so we went ahead with John Burroughs. But since that time, something has come out. Colonel Halt has made some sort of a statement. And I know that you recently had Larry on your show and talking about that very thing. So can you share with us a little bit about what that was that Colonel Halt had said that had Larry Warren so up in arms? And what do you think about that whole thing?
Before I hit that, let me preface it by saying this. I began Dark Matters with an S radio in 2003, all right? We first started broadcasting, myself and Dwight Schultz, in January of 2004. I had Dark Matters radio until a year or so back when Art Bell, after years-long absence from the radio airwaves, back when he was doing Coast to Coast, then he dropped off the face of the earth, came back for a short stint on Sirius Radio before he left again. He pulled the plug on himself. And when he came back, lo and behold, he was doing Dark Matter, okay? Now, there's an obvious similarity between the two, okay?
Yeah.
And he claimed later, well, I didn't know Don Ecker was doing Dark Matters Radio. Well, if this wasn't a family show, I would say something bovine excrement, okay?
Okay.
But this is a family show. Art Bell knows me very well. I think you would agree with that, wouldn't you, Renee?
Yes.
And it's not like I've ever hidden my radio show. So last week I wake up like I usually do at 6 a.m. I wandered out into the kitchen. I poured myself a cup of wake-up, a cup of coffee, sat down at my dining room table, turned on my mobile phone, and I scanned my email and Facebook. And lo and behold, I see a note up there from Larry Warren saying something about him being slandered and libeled on Dark Matters Radio. Now,
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know darn well he wasn't. So I put a note up there and I said, Larry, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm the host and owner of Dark Matters Radio, and no such show took place. Well, as it turned out, it was on the quote-unquote Dark Matter Network, radio network.
Right.
Okay. And there was a guy by the name of Martin Willis that was interviewing Burroughs and Charles Halt. Now, Charles Halt is the retired Air Force colonel that was a deputy base commander. And so I ended up listening to that show just to see what in the heck they were all talking about. And Halt made a remark that is still reverberating around paranormal circles, claiming that, and I'm going to paraphrase it for you,
okay,
that he has it on somebody's good authority that he knows and trusts very carefully and faithfully, and heard what appears to be an abduction session that Warren did with, of all people, Bud Hopkins. And of course, Bud now is deceased, as we all know. And Halt claimed that Warren was a quote-unquote substance abuser. Now, what's that say to you, Renee?
Well, okay. I guess I'm not understanding. Halt said that
Ray Warren was a substance abuser. In other words, he's
on drugs.
He's on drugs.
Yeah.
Now, Warren lives in the United Kingdom.
That's right.
He works for some type of security operation over there where before you can become employed, you've got to take drug tests and you've got to have a criminal background investigation conducted on you. And Warren was livid, rightly so livid. I mean, if I ever in my life saw a case that my attorney would love to get his hands on, it's what Halt said on that radio program. And before it's all said and done, he possibly may regret having said that. So,
well, I hope so. He shouldn't have said that. And but the thing of it is, did he protect himself legally by saying, "This is what I was told"? I'm not saying this, you understand, but somebody told me this.
Well, he did specify that he had it on good authority. Okay, good authority. Yeah. Now, I put on my detective hat, and I'm about 97% sure I know exactly who Halt was talking about. I'm not going to name her name, but I'm 97% sure who it was that made that remark to him. Now, I brought Warren.
Is it a name that we would know?
Yes.
Okay.
I invited Larry Warren on the Dark Matters Radio, and we ran it the beginning of the week, okay, on Monday. And as a matter of fact, it's in my radio archives now. It was a very pointed show, and he very forcefully refuted these allegations. It's a show, if you have an interest in these matters, and Rendlesham in particular, it's a show that you should listen to, and it's available for download or streaming online.
Great. And that's on that same website that we gave out earlier, right?
Well, that website is for live listening, but it has an icon there for Dark Matters Radio. If you click on the icon, it will take you directly to my archives.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, that would be a good one to catch. And what did, well, I guess I know what Larry said. He said it was not true. And the fact that he has to be drug tested for his job, so he has to prove it all the time.
Yeah.
Now, is he planning to take any legal action that you know of?
He indicated that he is seriously considering that. But, hey, Renee, I don't want to speak for him.
Yeah.
He
should, that's probably, I can imagine how that would be a serious consideration. Number one, just the expense of fighting a legal case like that. But, he should do some crowdfunding or something. I bet a lot of UFO backers and buffs and people that are interested might be interested in seeing a case like that come to court.
Yeah, he was very upset because it's more than just even his job. He and his ex-wife, which incidentally, I might add, I was best man when he got married. I
didn't know that.
Yeah, and Vicki, my wife, stood with his wife when they've now got a son that's, 13, 14 years.
Yeah.
And something like that could even interfere with his visitation over there. So, there are a lot of ramifications for making an allegation like that. It's just, and it's obvious to me. Hey, I read between the lines. In my opinion, Colonel Halt has a lot of resentment and anger in him, and it's directed at Warren for whatever reason. So, you know.
Yeah, I wonder why at him particularly.
Well, Larry was the first guy to break the code of silence on that incident.
Oh, I see.
During that show that I did with Warren on Monday, I played an excerpt from an interview I did with former CNN news correspondent Chuck DeCaro, who was the guy that broke the Bentwaters Rendlesham Forest case on CNN back in '84. Do you recall that?
You know, I do not remember seeing that on television, you know, commensurate with the event. I just remember hearing about it later, and then, of course, all the coverage that, you know, UFO Magazine did.
Well, I interviewed DeCaro on UFOs Tonite.
Oh, yes, I remember that. And I remember also Larry Warren coming to our offices at UFO Magazine, with Russ Estes.
Right. And I played an excerpt of that Chuck DeCaro interview I did, where he talks about Larry Fawcett was actually the guy that put DeCaro onto Larry Warren. Larry Fawcett, of course, and Barry Greenwood wrote the definitive book on military UFOs called Clear Intent. Back in the 80s. So
that's right.
Larry Fawcett was the guy that introduced Larry Warren to Chuck DeCaro, and then everything from that point forward is history. But the thing that you got to know about this case, when I say that Halt has a lot of resentment, when Halt's name became publicly affiliated to a UFO case that took place in a foreign country, the United Kingdom, on an Air Force base that housed nuclear weapons, that was the end of Halt's career.
Oh. But why?
Because that's just the way the military is, Renee. He brought unwanted illumination on something. You got to remember what the hell was going on then.
But how did he bring the illumination? I'm not defending Halt.
His memorandum.
I see.
Became public, okay? His tape recorder that he was recording what was happening out in the woods when he was out there investigating those lights. I mean, there's a lot of things that you know that stewed in on that. Yeah. Boy, I tell you, there's so many questions even to this day on so many of these cases. Well, on every one of them, really. But we're down now toward the very end of the show. What do you think is the best evidence for the fact that we are being visited by extraterrestrials or those from elsewhere? You think it's Roswell? Well, I'll tell you, if I had to take a look at what might be considered some of the best evidence, I would have to point to, and it's going to sound like I'm polishing my UFO badge, but it would have to be two cases that I personally broke on STS-48. STS-48 and the Soviet Union's Phobos 2 probe. Oh, right. Okay, talk about STS-48 first. We got like 4 minutes to go or less, so I wish I hadn't put this to so long. I totally meant to bring up STS-48 at the beginning, and I talked to Jeff about that earlier, and he mentioned it too. So the STS-48, there was footage. Well, in September of 1991, there was a shuttle mission that was in Earth orbit, and at the time of this infamous incident, it was flying over New Zealand and Australia, and it was shooting a live feed, okay, down to Earth-based stations, and this anomalous object rose above the limb of the Earth and was flying in a very leisurely motion across the screen when suddenly there was this huge explosion of light that affected the camera. And this was all in live time. And suddenly, from off screen, then it was on screen, something was streaking directly at this object. Suddenly, the object took just a violent right angle turn motion, quadrupling its speed, and shot out into space. And whatever was firing at it missed it. Then this object circled back around. Now, that is, when you talk about a smoking gun of an anomalous object and what could only be a weapons firing of some type at it, this was, this
golden. It was golden.
Yeah, I ended up breaking that first on NBC, okay, on hard copy. One of the producers over there, I knew, Dean Ballas. Do you remember him, Renee?
I do. We've got about 30 seconds just to...
And then on Larry King Live.
Larry King Live is the main one I remember, because that show, even Larry King said, we'll be right back with Don Ecker Live instead of Larry King Live. That was hilarious.
What he said was, I hope you've enjoyed.
Oh, that's right. This edition of Don Ecker Live. Well, I hope my listeners have enjoyed this edition of Don Ecker Live. And Don, everybody is saying, we've got to get you back. We've got to get you back. And I was telling the chat room mates that I was also going to have to get Vicki on one of these nights, too, because she's got a lot to tell about her experiences in the production of the magazine, UFO Magazine, and the founding of it. So...
That's my lovely bride, by the way.
That's right. That's right. I can attest to that. I was there for the marriage. So, Don, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Darling, as always, it's a distinct pleasure.
Oh, thanks so much. And will you come back?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we got to make it soon, and you got to make Vicki agree to come on too. She doesn't like to speak publicly, but she does such a great job when she does.
You know, she always says, oh, I can't think of anything to say. And then, for the next hour and a half, you're trying to get her to shut up. So,
yeah. Isn't that the truth? Well, give her my love, and we will talk soon. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday, and enjoy your family, enjoy your friends, and take care.